was the last time you saw Barron?
Is that Barron?
I know this is hard. But do you recognize these boys?
Do they know something?
What they're saying on the news about Barron, I know it's not true.
My son made a complete statement. It's a terrible tragedy.
His kid knows what happened to Barron. He was there.
You are not to do anything without my permission.
Anything that I had to lose, I've already lost. Ethan, I need to talk to you.
Today at 3 p.m., my son, Ethan, went missing from his school.
Did you hurt my son?
You won't hurt me. I know you won't.
What are you looking to build? Maybe I should ask, what are you trying to break?
He's the son of a future senator. You know what that means?
We have to find this missing boy. You can get into a lot of trouble, and I don't want that.
Caleb, why are you doing this?
I wanted Barron to be brave. Why should I want that for myself?
I have worked too hard to build this life.
Barron killed himself because he hated you.
I know that you did this.
Law enforcement is working tirelessly to find him and to bring him home safe.
We're gonna handle this locally.
I took care of it personally. File it closed.
We are confident that Ethan will be home where he belongs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Hurt with the NRW, where nerds rule the world, and I'm here with Ari Kelman, who is the director and writer of Barron's Cove. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, Heather. Great to meet you. Thanks for being here with me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me some of your time today. I know that your schedule is pretty busy today. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's a fun day for sure. We've got our screening later today with the cast and the crew, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
So you say you have the screening today. Has any of them seen the movie yet? Or were we just lucky enough to see it first?
Some people have seen it. We premiered at the Hamptons Film Festival in October, and quickly got distribution after that. We screened in Dallas at a film festival there. But tonight is going to be the first time that most of our cast and crew are going to be seeing it in its finished, complete state. So I'm really looking forward to experiencing it with the whole team and celebrating what we've done.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, congratulations. I hope you all have fun tonight. With that being said, let's talk about this movie. So Barron's Cove is this interesting political conspiracy family story, like broken family, kind of hodgepodge action film. Where did this story come from? Where did it all begin?
That's a great question. And it all began in kind of these different corners that, sort of all met into one kind of pipeline that became this film. You could say this film began, 20 years ago, or when I started to think about, when I started to develop a taste for the films that I love, like you said, these political thrillers and, these espionage and kind of, conspiracy types of stories and, police cover-ups. And those are the kinds of movies that I love, these crime thrillers. So in a sense, the story, this movie started there. In another sense, as I've gotten older, there have been themes that have become, really thought-provoking and kind of captivating to me. It's themes of, relationships between parents and their kids and fathers and sons in particular, loyalty, love, all of these kind of big themes that I sort of love to test in these, in really intense environments. And then, there maybe the biggest inspiration, or maybe the piece that made it all kind of click, is when I heard about this true story in England, this very tragic story where these two kids led another kid to train tracks, and unfortunately there was a murder. And in real life, those kids went through a rehabilitation program and so on and so forth. But using my background and the themes that I like to think about, and my hunger for sort of telling a story that resonated with me, I just started to think about, okay, well, what if something else happened here? What if there was a cover up, and what if you had a father who had nothing left to lose after the only good thing in his life was taken away as he understood it? How far would he go to get the truth? And what would happen if you involved a family member who had competing motivation to maybe handle it differently than he would? And pretty soon these relationships started to take shape that, like, as a writer, once those threads start to be pulled, you can't really stop thinking about it until you get to the other end. So that's a long answer to your great question.
I like the long answers. I'd rather talk less and let you talk more. With that being said, Caleb, this is a very intricate story. There are several pieces that go into this, backstabbing, politics, a campaign on the trail kind of situation. Caleb is a very interesting character for like the lead of an action series. Like we've seen, the retired criminal in the past. We've seen that before. But Caleb is a little bit more than that. Like he found his calling in his son. And then you see that in the relationship that he built with Ethan. Who was Caleb when you got those first steps in, you figured out where you were going to go with this? Who was Ethan in your head as you were writing him?
Who was Caleb in my head?
I'm sorry, Caleb in my head. Yeah, yes, in your head. So Ethan was a little boy. Who is Caleb in your head? I'm sorry.
He was man. This was I wanted to have somebody who had nothing left to lose. If you took everything good out of this person's life, who would he be?
Mm-hmm.
And there was this idea that he had this very negative self-reflection of who he was. He thought he was a bad person because of bad things that he had done, in his backstory, some of which we allude to in the film. But this is a person who's kind of been, treated his whole life like he's a bad guy and has had to do bad things, and that's kind of his, self-conception. And here he had his son, which in his mind was kind of the only chance that he had at, contributing something good to this world. And so when that was taken away from him, who would he become, to sort of get to the bottom of what happened? That was the thread that I was really excited to sort of pull. And there's a lot of anger there, of course, and a lot of rage, and a lot of there's a component of generational trauma that he's been caught up in. And I wanted to kind of take all of that emotion and sort of, again, stretch it to its limits and try to pull him through a journey where he would come out, on the other side with, not necessarily what he wanted, but what he needed. And that just felt like a very compelling arc that I wanted to explore.
And with that being said, after I got the names backwards, you have a really his realization moment when him and Ethan are when they are really getting to know each other after the kidnapping has occurred. You see who he really is inside. Like when he's in the police station, you see him explode as a father, and you see that true moment as a dad. But then you see who he is in that relationship. And you mentioned how important it was for you to explore the father-son dynamic in this film. Why is that relationship so important to really expose in a story like this?
That's a really great question. And some of the answer to that, kind of comes through, like, in the other direction, like as the writer and as the artist, and you don't always know what you're getting at or why you're getting at it. You just know that it is something that you need to explore, and questions that you need to ask, and that it's important. I think that, I'm heavily influenced by my relationship, with my father. And I've met other people who are as well, not always in positive ways. I know people who have had, very negative, relationships with their parents or their dad in particular, and I've seen the ways that it has affected their lives and their self-image and their values, and especially their self-image, and just the influence that has on a person's life, especially a boy's life, and then ultimately a man's life. I just think that there's something worthwhile to sort of explore there. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it does seem to be something that we should be thinking about and talking about and sort of looking at and remembering.
With that being said, there's a lot of very modern takes on, there's a lot of very modern themes, the mom and her, she has moved into with a same-sex partner. She's got and you've got, those political conspiracies, and Lyle is like the perfect politician in so many ways. Like he's that very stereotypical politician right now, and it's great. With that, to move on into the more directorial part of this, some of your sequences are very tight. You have a lot of close-ups, and you have a lot of, and when there is action, it's often in very tight knit places. What was the most difficult part in directing this film?
Great question. The most difficult part in directing this film was working with the limited time that we had, and having to balance, style, which I think is very closely related to, the audience's emotional journey. For example, like when you have a close up that has a certain effect, or what you do with the camera is going to have a certain effect on the audience, and those are important. But those kinds of shots that maybe you only use for a very specific beat, they often can take a lot of time, and so you have to balance deciding to do those shots with setups that cover more of a scene, more dialogue, more action. And that's a difficult balance, because you might, as a director, you might say, I really 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 need a close up on Caleb's face, as he's getting this news, and it needs to be at this certain angle, because that's how we're really going to feel the personal space, and kind of see what he's going through emotionally. But then you might say, well, if you're going to do two shots on Caleb, then you're not going to be able to do, a single on the other person in the room. And, if you can only pick, let's say, two shots in this example, you have to be really thoughtful. Okay, I'm going to get one shot of Caleb, and I'm going to get one shot of the other character, just so the audience doesn't get confused. Those are the kind of the difficult decisions you have to make as a director. It's often painful decisions, because you can't get everything you want. So you have to, choose between clarity and style, and basically hope that you're creating the right mixture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk to you about your style a little bit. You seem to play with color in several of the scenes. There were some blues and some reds that were really strong in several of your scenes. Was there a reason for that, or was that just, kind of just being artsy and fun?
There's always a reason for it. Sometimes you have the impulse, and then you have to, later you can do the work to understand what the reason was. You know what I mean? Like when you, as an artist, you can picture a scene, and you understand, who the characters are, and what the conflict is. And as a visual, creative, with that comes a color and composition and production design. I see the whole thing, and then I have to almost do the work later to say, okay, why is that what I'm picking up? And it can be influenced by, all kinds of things. The themes often tie into the color, or, the setting, might provide a natural color that then you sort of, heighten or lean into, if the conflict is sort of, giving you the space to sort of push that atmosphere a little bit more, let's say. So there's a lot of reasons why you might lean, into color or out of color. And it totally depends on the scene. But of course, this is a visual medium. You obviously you don't want people to watch, a gray picture. A color pulls emotion out of us. and can, bring us into the world a little bit deeper. Obviously, don't want to overdo it. So it's about finding the balance and, using all the tools at your disposal.
Wonderful. That was beautiful. Art is art, right? There is my last real quick question for you, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, guys. I'm sorry, but I have to know. It is at the beginning of the film. We go from this moment where the parents where they realize that Barron isn't home, and then the next thing we know, we have kind of a secretive moment at the train tracks where the police are just coming in to find Barron's body, and then Caleb comes rushing in. How did he find out about this if it's still kind of under wraps? I just want to know from a writer's perspective.
No problem. There are basically, I think at one point of the script, we actually had a scene where he heard it on the radio, and like he was doing an interview with a police officer, and he heard it on the radio, child's body, found at this location. And that was, the logic there for a long time. That scene eventually went away. And then I had a scene where, a police officer was saying to Detective Navarro, like apologizing, like, I'm really sorry about that. We were interviewing, he heard it on the radio. It was like a very quick aside. But that, it didn't seem like something we needed to explain. People sort of understood that could be possible. It's also a small town. People talk. If your entire police force, is at, a location at the train tracks and there's a missing kid, it doesn't take a lot of math to realize, okay, if you hear there's a body in a crime scene and my son is missing, it doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that's where I need to go. So, once all of these rationales kind of come up, there's of course, it's almost like, of course you'd hear about it in this kind of town, because you do. It didn't seem like something we needed to kind of go out of our way to explain.
Fair. That was just me being more, a curious Nancy than anything else.
Well, it's a good answer, because I think it speaks to the character, a good question rather. It speaks to the character of the town, the size of the town and the way that information, the way that everyone knows each other and people are talking. It's a very insular community, which, plays into the plot. So I think it's a really good question.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Evan, for your time today. Barron's Cove arrives in theaters and on demand on June 6th, and have fun at y'all's premiere tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Nerds rule the world.
Pleasure chatting with you. Love to all my nerds who rule the world.
Yeah. Nerds rule the world.
Yes, we do.
Thanks. Nerds rule the world. Thank you.
I love the nerds ruling the world. So more power to you.
Patrick, what up, man? And yes, they do. Nerds rule the world, kid.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Awesome. Kuya P, nerds rule the world. Hello.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Oh,
nerds rule the world.
I got.
It's in the title of your show, like nerds rule the world. Like I want more black weirdos on screen, and I don't feel like we ever get to see that very much.
Thank you so much. Nerds do rule the world.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Nerds rule.
Love
it. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Julian.
Yes, nerds rule. Yes,
rock on. I love it. Thank you so much.
It's good to see you. I love Nerds Rule the World.
But yeah, there's a heavy nerd component, man.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you ask me, nerds rule the world. So
absolutely.
And you're right. Nerds do rule the world.
We're just the best.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies.
Nerds so much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
It's your boy Kuya P. Nerds rule the world. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you.
They rule the world all right.
Yes. Take care, Tony. Thank you, guys.